I'm Leon Todd for G66. Welcome to another Tuesday Tone Tip. On today's video, we're going to take a look at the new TouchWire type in the latest beta release for the Axe FX3, firmware 27.01, and we're going to use it to try to cop a little bit of the classic U2 mysterious ways tone. If you're unaware of the gear used on that song, the Edge famously used a Korg A3, which was a single rack space processor. Now, the A3 had a little expansion card you could get to get more algorithms and to get more presets. Kind of like a firmware update back in the day. There wasn't the internet and you couldn't just download them or use Fractal bot to update your device. You'd need one of these physical cards. You could pop that into your unit and you could get this preset. Now, I've got a Korg A3 and I've done an in-depth demo video with it. I even set up that patch on there. So I've been able to go back and actually measure the other effects that go into the mysterious ways sound. But for now, we're going to start with this TouchWire type on here. And I've set it up according to the tips in the release notes. So this is from Cliff, Mr. Fractal Audio himself. It says right here, added a TouchWire type to the filter block. This is similar to the envelope filter, but it uses a different type of detector. If you want to replicate the Korg A3 TouchWire sound, do this. Set the mode to mix, set the start frequency to maximum, stop frequency to minimum. We're going to use 500 milliseconds for the attack, 200 for the release, and then we'll adjust the sensitivity to taste. Now, I'm playing a Hamer standard, so I'm going to have to play around with the sensitivity on here. This has a Duncan EVH pickup in the bridge, but you can see I have plugged those settings in. I'm on the TouchWire. I've used the mix mode, so there's band pass, high pass, and low pass. Cranked up the start frequency, turned the stop frequency all the way down. Sensitivity is at 5, so the stock setting on there. Attack at 500, release at 200 on there. Now, the editor isn't updated just yet. It will be with the full release, but for now, I'm just going to play around with that sensitivity setting on there. Then I'll show you the other effects that replicate the other elements of that Korg patch. So around somewhere between 2.5 and 4 is a pretty good place to start, depending on the output of your pickups in your guitar. I should mention as well, I'm using the Class A 30-watt Brilliant amp model in here, so based on a Vox AC30. I've got the matching Dynacabs in here. I've used a ribbon and dynamic blend, and I have a tiny amount of plate reverb on there. Now, I pulled my Korg A3 out just before this and looked at what else was in the patch. There is distortion, there is some delay, and there is a flanger on there. And the flanger in combination with the TouchWire is the real magic in there. So let's start out really quickly by adding the delay. It's a fairly simple delay with around 200 milliseconds of echo. I measured it around 210 milliseconds on there. I've got the mix really low because it's in front of the amp, feedback at 20%. If we add that, we get this. If you want that to sound a little cleaner, place it after the amp and cab block, but we're just replicating this patch at the moment. Next, I've gone with the stereo jet flanger. Pretty much left this at the stock settings. All I've done is turn the rate down a little bit on here and the mix control. This has a really nice kind of almost vowel-like filter sound itself. So when you combine it with the filter on there, you get this. This just reminds me so much of like every other preset on any digital multi-effects from the early to mid 90s. I had a Zoom 707 when I started playing, and so many of the patches sounded like this. But I'm getting sidetracked at the moment. The last thing we want to do is add some drive to this. So I'm going to use the Super OD, and I just went back and forth really quickly with a bunch of different drive types and the stock distortion setting in the A3. I thought this sounded pretty close. You could try the Boss DS1 distortion model in there, or the Griddle Cake as well. I mean, the great thing about the Axe-Fx is you can tune this and dial it in any way you like. You're not stuck with the stock sounds of the 30-year-old Korg unit. You have access to all these great boutique drives in here. So let's just hear that, but we need to make one change after this. By placing the drive before the filter, we're accurately replicating what's happening in that original patch. However, we've totally messed with the input signal going into the TouchWire, so it doesn't have the same sensitivity settings that are going to apply. So I could go and play around with the sensitivity and get that perfect again, or I could just set the detector source to input 1, where I've got my guitar plugged in. So I've got the TouchWire after the drive, but it is detecting the raw DI of my guitar, so I should still have that nice silky sweep that I spent that time dialing in. Let's try this. That sounds a lot closer. Now, if you really wanted to cop the recorded tone on there, you would need to dial in the amp and cab, and keep in mind that is a fully mixed and mastered record on there with overdubs, with effect sends, with bus processing. Close enough is good enough a lot of the time, especially when you're playing live. I think you could probably just slap on that filter and the flanger, and in a live setting, if you need to cover mysterious ways, that's going to get you super close straight away. You don't have to muck around with attaching modifiers to elements of the filter block or anything like that. You can just bring up this new TouchWire type on there and absolutely go to town. If you were playing in a tribute band, of course, I'm sure you've got the time to invest in this to get it that little bit closer on there, but this is a fantastic starting point. And again, it's so awesome having the release notes, which just give you this starting point in here. I actually feel like this should be a stock type in here. You should have like TouchWire, and then you should have, I don't know, Mysterious Wire or something like that with these as the defaults. Now, of course, you can totally rearrange these blocks in here really easily. Like I said earlier, you know, the delay might sound better after the cab to you, along with the flanger on there. You could even place the filter after that as well if you wanted to. You could crank up more reverb on here. And, you know, there's the amazing thing about the Axe-Fx. You can start by trying to emulate a classic sound, but then you can really turn it into your own. So I'm actually going to do this with the delay. I'm going to change the tempo to a dotted eighth note. You know, the Edge is famous for using that dotted eighth note rhythmic delay on a lot of recordings there. I'll leave the drive and the filter on there. I'm just going to have some fun playing around with some kind of rhythmic style effects on here. So let me just bring the overall tempo on here. Let's say 135. That's a nice tempo for a rhythmic delay. If you've got any other questions or suggestions, please let me know in the comments section below. Otherwise, I will see you all on next week's Tuesday Tone Tip. This should be good fun.